All the media days, what question have you been asked the most?
Oh, I don't think it really the most. You get an array of questions, everything from people that grew up in around my hometown that were here with me when I was in school. That I had a good one today. I met a young man that when he was little, that I had taken a picture with a while back out of town, and it was a pretty unique situation. But I get a lot of different questions today.
Talk a little about the new offensive coordinator and his adjustment to Cowboy football and your adjustment to him.
I think Mike's doing very well. I'm comfortable with the way he's settled in, and he's much different in practice than he was in the spring. And I mentioned a few days ago, I thought that he approached it in the right manner, and that he allowed the other coaches to coach, and he was new to the system. He didn't know as much as they did, not as much as the quarterbacks did. But I think he's very comfortable with our system now, and I see him being much more aggressive in practice, and seems to be going very well at this time.
Coach, talk about Jason Ray and what he brings to the table for inside receivers.
Jason's a young, enthusiastic coach. It's kind of new to our profession, and I was attracted to him, one, because he was from Oklahoma, two, he had played at Missouri and been in the offense that I think's really the same way we do when it comes to speed. And he's done very well. I think he's got a good temperament, and he's got a good future in our game.
You mentioned in one of the caravans that Jeremy can carry the ball 20 or 25 times a game. Talk about his kind of maturity or whatever since he's been on campus, and now he's going to take over that kind of lead role.
Well, the backs that we've had that have kind of had or taken the lead role for us have carried the ball 20 times a game for the most part. And a lot of that's based on how the other team plays us. You know, they may make us throw more passes based on how many guys they put up there to stop the run. But he's really developed a lot in the last couple of years. You know, there was a time where he wasn't sure that college football was for him. But he made that choice, and I'm sure he's glad now. In fact, I know he is, and he's done really well for our team. And so now it's the time for him to carry the load, and we'll have to develop a young back. We've already got a couple of young men on campus that have been here a couple of years. They don't have a lot of experience, but they'll have to carry the ball 5, 6, 7, 8 times a game. So now's his time.
Have you seen anything mentally change with him since he found out he's going to be the primary guy back in January?
Not really. Jeremy's fairly quiet and kind of go about his business. And I think the advantage we have, not only with him but some of the other players, is they've been in so many big games, and that everything's just another day for them, which is good. But he seems to be doing very well at this time, though.
Mike, in the offseason, you added a kind of a strange transfer with Tyler Patman. You get a veteran guy to come in and help that corner position, but you still are really going to have to rely on two somewhat pups, but Kevin and Ashton Lampkin both got some time. Talk about those two young guys and what you expect out of them at that corner position this year.
Well, they'll be better than they were last year. You know, we had to rely on some last year, and it's really scary when you have a true freshman out there on the edge. And they've developed. They still have to learn to mature and understand play hard all the time, which is usually the last piece for a football player at this level, understanding how to compete on every play. But they move their hips, they can turn their hips, and they can accelerate. So, you know, as we progress through preseason, they certainly are going to have to play in games and give the other guys a break.
There are two guys, too, that seem to have really embraced some of at least the attitude change with Glenn and what he wants from that outside position. They kind of they're more in-your-face kind of guys, being a little younger.
And they've they've only been here a year, and so the change is not as significant for them as it would be for other guys. And so they've had a pretty smooth transition into the style of play that we're interested in this fall.
When Kevin was being recruited, did he strike you as a guy that could come in and contribute early, or did he kind of blossom once he got here?
We thought so, but it's really hard to tell. But he's mature enough and intelligent enough to get on the field and play early, and then you have to stay healthy. Guys that are in their first year or so, if they don't stay healthy in preseason camp, it's really hard for them to play as a freshman.
Those two guys are good examples. Prematurely, I may have asked you in Dallas about the condition of your team, and you said, man, I need to talk to Rob some more. You've seen him out there 2 days, and so the barometer I'm using is some of these guys in your extreme camp, and they come up and say, God, every year these guys look more athletic and look better.
Well, they are. I think every year we, in all of college athletics, I think you find better athletes that are in better shape, high school programs, and they're understanding training during the season, out of season, their eating habits. And you're seeing more refined athletes now than we ever have. We've had 2 practices and really hadn't had any sun and not a lot of heat. It was a little humid today, but it still wasn't real hot. So I can't imagine that our guys aren't in good condition. After spending 8 weeks with Rob Glass, I would think that they're in pretty good condition.
Talk about the decision to reward Jeremy Seaton with a scholarship.
Well, we had a number of players that fit the criteria and are eligible for us to put on scholarship. And, we have our wall downstairs that you guys have seen that we're very proud of, that we've had a number of walk-ons here earn scholarships and compete and play very well at this level. And we've had guys that are playing the NFL that were walk-ons. And Jeremy has worked extremely hard, and he competes on Saturdays, and he's in there with the ones, and so he's a guy that qualifies himself to be put on scholarship. And for a coach, for our coaching staff, that's one of the neatest parts of our job, is to be able to tell a young man that we're able to put him on scholarship.
A walk-on, when he arrives, is just a face in the crowd. I mean, at what moment do you know, hey, this isn't just a guy? You know?
It's changed a little bit, Jimmy, in that we get some of these walk-ons in the summer now, and there's a certain number of them, 12 to 15, it varies a little bit, that will go through preseason with Coach Glass in the summer. Now, we don't ever get a chance to see them, but during that training, one, if they make it through it, and 2, if they seem like they hang in there, then they have a chance physically. And then after the first couple weeks, we can usually tell if a young man's got a chance at some point to compete at this level.
Mike, you've had a lot of marquee receivers over the years, but compare this group top to bottom in terms of talent and depth to other ones you've had.
I think we have a really good group, and at times it's a little unfair to compare guys to Dez and Blackman with the history of one, first round picks and 2 of the most talented players to compete in this league. But from top to bottom, as you mentioned, we have 10 or 12 guys that I think in 3 weeks could play in a game and go out there with the ones and have success. So we may be as good at that position as we ever have been without having a maybe potential first-round guy that would be in the senior class.
Mike, every opener presents its own challenges, but what's different? What's the challenge difference when you're facing a Mississippi State versus
Savannah? Yeah. Obviously, they're very physical. One thing that when you play an SEC team, you're going to compete against a group of guys up front that are they're going to be 300 pounds and they're going to run well. And what it forces us to do is to pick the pace up a little bit a week to 10 days earlier than what we would want to in preseason camp. And that's really the challenge, is that we have to do a good job as coaches of giving them enough to be prepared for the first game, but not so much that it affects them later in the year. And we've had discussions about it, and we're obviously settled in on a plan, and that's what we'll stay with till the game.
Safe to say, if you were opening, say, against the Savannah State and said, stud this year, you might have already named a starting quarterback?
Very well could have. You bring up a good point there. I would say it's probably a pretty good chance.
What's it mean to the offense if you're a guy like Tracy Moore back, and if you've seen in the couple days he's been out there, just his excitement level to be back on the field?
Tracy's been good. He had a good spring and was good this summer. As I mentioned, other than Joseph Randall, before Tracy got hurt, he was really our best player on offense when you tie in experience, maturity, ability, and playing on the road and make tough catches and things like that. So it's good to have him back. We were very fortunate when that, unfortunate but then fortunate with Ori Lemon. And so we're hoping that the situation will be similar with Tracy.
When you enter a season where you're picked to win the Big 12, how do you try to manage expectations and try not to let the players kind of buy into the hype too much?
Well, we have to kind of measure and feel how the team thinks, and I don't really see a difference in their approach mentally. They've practiced well, and again, it hasn't been real hot yet, so the challenges are in front of them. The guys that have to make the plays and lead the team, there's always a core of 6 or 8 or 10 guys, and then you'll have an additional 12 or 15 that are still learning. As Robert mentioned, the Kevin Petersons and Lampkins and those guys, they played last year, but they really don't get it yet because they weren't in there in key times for an extended amount of games. And so the guys that have to lead our team seem to be doing very well, and we're fortunate that they're pretty calm and they're pretty humble guys, and so we really haven't faced an issue yet. But we've told them, our staff's told them, I've told them that being picked number 1 preseason is a tribute to the guys that have been here before them and what they've done. That means absolutely nothing when it comes to playing during the season, because that's what we tell them if we're not picked number 1. So that's the same, but they've handled it well.
Mike, your reaction to the poll and the perceived lack of respect for the Big 12, not getting anybody in the top 10?
Yeah, really just kind of the same answer is that, we're all going to get to play them. We feel like that we have a lot of strength in our league. I think that people that vote in those polls and have an opinion, whether it's media or fans or just the general public, for the first time in a long time, you don't see 1 or 2 teams that would be in the top 10. So that kind of shocks everybody a little bit. But, a couple of years ago, we weren't anywhere near being in the top 10, and most of that season we were really a top 10 team. So we just have to see how it all plays out.
What about as a conference as a whole?
Well, that's what I was saying. And I said this last year, is preseason polls, for the majority, in my opinion, are based on returning quarterback play, because we all know how important quality quarterback play is to winning games. And this league graduated over the last 2 years, and even last year, a number of guys that are good enough to play in the NFL. So they look on paper and say there's not many returning quarterbacks in this league, and so you're not going to get recognized as much as other schools.
Coach, Wendell Johnson switched to safety. How do you think he's developing so far?
He's got some learning that has to take place. He's doing okay. He was only out there for, if it took him 6 or 7 practices to kind of figure out what was going on, then he's really only out there for 4 or 5 more in the spring, because we have a spring game and we had early practices we didn't have pads on. So I think we'll have a better feel for where he's at a couple weeks from now, because the practices that we have moving forward from this point on will be quality practices.
With the lack of marquee returning quarterbacks, how do you think that will affect the league and the league race this year?
Y'all's guess is as good as mine. And for the fans, for the media, this year is exciting as it gets, because I don't know that anybody really knows. For the coaches, it's tough because it's week to week for us, especially having 9 conference games. And I think it would be unfair to even begin to predict what could happen in the league this year. I'm in agreement with what everybody says. I think you have a certain number of teams, 5, 6, however many that may be, if they stay healthy and get quality quarterback play, could have a chance to win the league.
You've been around a lot of good coaches, and one guy that your fans have come up with a phrase to coin his job, "In Wick we trust." Talking about Joe Wickline and how he just year after year puts out an offensive line that gets the job done. Talk a little bit about how he gets the job done and the value that he has with being on your staff.
You know, Joe's the last guy from my original staff, and we've been together now 9 years. And the first few years, really the first couple years, it was I had a hard time understanding his coaching philosophy, and it, for a while there, was somewhat uncomfortable, but allowed it to happen, and just sat back and said, I want to see what the results are, and the results have always been favorable, and for that reason. I've allowed him, and I guess, to coach the way that he feels comfortable, which is very unique, unorthodox for the most part, in pretty much his everyday activity. But you have to look at results and the success that he's had, and I think it speaks for itself.
Any doubt this line will, do you see already spring to fall camp, this group will take shape and kind of just step in line?
Well, I haven't seen it yet because we haven't had pads on. So, we've got 4 or 5 days here to get them up and going. We need to get hot and get out there and get them tired and then see how they react. But to answer your question, I would expect for them to play well, just like the other groups that he's had.
Mike, Gundy, talk a little bit about the kicking game, and is it a major concern of yours?
Oh, I don't think it's a concern, but it's something that I think about because everybody around here that's watched Oklahoma State football has been spoiled with Quinn, and he brought so much to the table. But we'll have new guys in there, and it creates uncertainty. Nobody likes uncertainty. But I'm not concerned. I have faith in our concepts and our schemes, and I have faith in our coaches that are involved in it. And in a week or so, we'll name a punter, we'll name a kicker, and we'll stand behind him and let him go play.
Mike, does playing a more challenging opener affect your decision-making process when it comes to redshirting your first-year guys? How does it affect?
Could, kind of as a follow-up to Jenny's question, this opener affects 2 or 3 things. 1, our practice approach. 2, how physical we are. And 3, our kicking game. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anybody, but last year, the kicker wasn't really a factor in the first game. Well, the kicker and the punter in this first game would certainly be a factor. So we have to to speed up the process in getting those guys ready to play. But I don't think, or we shouldn't, as a coaching staff, let it affect our red shirt, because these young men in 15 days will either be ready or they won't. Not necessarily who we're playing, just based on how they handle the conditioning and practice and their health.
How do you equate the loss of Blunt, yet you still have 2 experienced quarterbacks, not 3 experienced quarterbacks, but as far as more practice time for the other 2 guys, or is there a pro and con to the whole thing?
Well, the con is that we lost him. I tried to recruit him twice. He's one of the few players I recruited twice. Got him the first time, failed the second. Calvin Barnett, I failed the first time, got him the second. But it helps us with reps, Al, just what you mentioned. One issue we had, and I shared this with everybody in the spring, is trying to get them all work. Because you have to get quality work with the right guys in order to have a chance for success on Saturdays. And when you had 3 guys, it was difficult. We had discussions about how that was going to work this fall. And unfortunately, for us, Wes left. But the good news with that happening is it helped us from a rep standpoint.
There were times last year when Justin Gilbert kind of struggled on the field. What do you expect to see out of him this year?
Justin has had a good winter conditioning, and he had a good spring, and he's been really good this summer. And I expect for him to play completely different than what he did last year. And I felt like he listened to outside sources, people that didn't have his best interest at heart. And sometimes when you're 20 years old or 21, however old he is, you can get tugged in the wrong direction. And I think that he kind of protected himself and didn't play very well, and he agrees. So I look for him to play better this fall.
Mike, obviously beating Ole Miss is important for you guys, but there are a couple other Big 12 teams playing SEC teams as well. You got caught up in the perception game a couple of years ago. You know how that can factor into rankings and all that sort of thing. Is it important for the Big 12 to win these games against these SEC teams, or at least play pretty darn well in them?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question the Mississippi State game's a big game. And when you have the preseason competition and the way that the BCS is set up, the way that it's eventually going to be set up with the Final Four, I don't know, what has anybody ever decided what we're going to call that?
College football playoff.
Okay, the college football playoff, whatever it's going to be called. These games will factor in. So if we as an administration decide to play those games, then you have to be ready for that to factor in to the nation's perspective of you as a football team after that game. And I don't think it's going to be any other way.
Mike, you were considered an innovator a few years ago when you decided during the regular season to cut back on the amount of contact. With all the talk now about safety in football, was safety a part of your thought process when you decided to curtail it during the regular season?
Safety was, they're directing it more now at blows to the head. I think the concussions, which is really good because we all worry about that. I have my own kids that play football, and I don't think there's ever a time that they go out there that you don't worry about a blow to the head. So we're trying to make the game safer. Years ago, fatigue, which we feel like is a key factor in injuries. And we thought that we were fatiguing our players, putting them in a situation that they couldn't perform at a high level, which increased their chances of being injured. And so safety was our thought at that time, and we like that concept. And there's certainly pros and cons. I don't think there's any question. I've had a number, a barrage of people say, your defense, they could tackle better if you hit more. Well, that's probably true, but there's give and take in everything we do. We've been fortunate over the last few years that our injuries have been limited, and I say that we had a couple issues with our quarterback last year that were somewhat unorthodox, but for the most part, yes, the safety and the health of our team, because if we don't get them there on Saturday, we're never going to really know. They've got to show up there. Now, the flip side of that is they got to be physical and be in good shape. So those are the decisions that we make.
Your brother.
Go ahead.
If you could make a decision on behalf of college football that would enhance the safety of the game and alleviate some of the concerns, what would be the thing that you would say, let's do this?
I believe that they're moving in the right direction. I just have some concerns of putting too much of the decision-making process into an official's hands. Not that they would pick one team or the other to make a poor choice, but when I listen to Walt Anderson, the director of officiating for our league, and those officials and have conversations with them, for the most part, they don't want to be in that situation either. Okay, they want to be able to make a call, and it's either this or this way. They don't really want to have to factor into making a decision, and we all know why. There's tons of money involved in decisions that are made in games. So that's my concern, but I think that we're moving in the right direction. The targeting rule is what's become very popular right now, and I think that the short-term solution for this new rule is, if you can tell through video replay that a player has had a number of steps and still targeted and hit another player up in the head in the open field, it's evident that he thought about doing that. But for example, the video that we all watch with the young man from South Carolina that hit the guy from Michigan, I don't know that he had any time to even think about that. I think he was just playing the game. And there's been a number of people say that would have been an ejection. That would really concern me because I wouldn't know what to tell him. He just went up the field and slanted inside, and he hit him. So that's my opinion. Everybody's got an opinion, but that's my opinion on the rule.
For background, your brother dealt with more, at least visually, it seemed like. But do you look back on your career, even though people didn't know concussions as well back then, and say, yeah, I was concussed and still play? I mean, do you think back on some occasions that happened to you?
Well, obviously, he's had more concussions, you can tell. And I didn't mean that in a bad way for people. I have a lot of, I honestly didn't mean it. I meant it much more toward him. But because people that have had concussions, it's a very different situation, because some people, I know that we've had them too, and they didn't know how to measure it. And everybody kind of recovers and reacts differently. That's why when we have a young man that has had a blow to the head, sometimes he's back out there in 2 days, sometimes he's out for a month. Because the testing they have now, which I think is good, nobody really knows until they put him through the testing. And there's a lot of opinions based on how they end up with these tests. But somebody that's a lot smarter than me's come up with them, and I think the system's pretty good. I don't think it's perfect, but I think it's pretty good, and it works.
What's your gut feeling on how official crews will handle this, though, in the beginning? Do you think they'll be overly cautious about it, or do you think they'll try to work it in as the games go on because of the ejection factor?
Well, you've watched college football for 3 or 4 years in your career, and if the thing that worries me is when there's a new rule in effect, they usually try to call it and set a standard. And I'm hoping that it won't be that way. I'm hoping that unless it's a blatant target, then they'll try to keep the game the same. I thought the game was fine, in my opinion. I do think there's an advantage in replay, and because if you just put yourself in the situation of the official, and you've got your keys you're watching, and all of a sudden there's that, and then something happens. How do you really know? I mean, you have to make a decision just like that. So I think that the replay can really factor in, but I honestly don't know what their thought process will be. I have a lot of faith in Walt Anderson in our league. I really do. And I think that he'll handle it the right way.
You already talked about distribution of reps being a little easier with 2 guys instead of 3. But what's it like, just as a coaching staff in general, compared to last year? This year you've got 2 guys with a pretty substantial amount of on-field experience. Compared to last year, you had 3 with not a whole lot. So what's it do to your decision-making process whenever you have 2 guys that you have at least a little bit of confidence and definitely an idea of what they'll do on the field?
It certainly makes us feel better. At this time last year, I don't know, somebody could pull my quotes up, but I said, we feel like Wes is going to be a good player, but our concern is he's never played. And then, thank God I didn't know that we were going to have to play 3 of them at that time. And we were very fortunate that they didn't have any experience and they played pretty well. So the difference this year is now you feel a little better because they've been out there, they've played on the road, they've been in tough environments, they've executed. And they certainly know the offense better than they did a year ago, just from being around.
Last year, whenever Chell found out that he was a little lower on the depth chart, and I know he at least considered transferring, you guys and some of the players talked him into staying. What was the difference whenever he stayed compared to when Lunt left? I mean, why do you suppose he stayed, I guess, from your perspective?
Well, first off, I think the players talked him into staying. That's just my opinion. I've not had a direct conversation with him about it. I was just glad he came back. And I think his teammates wanted him here, and I think they're the ones that brought him back. I think it's, sometime he might write a book or something and tell the true story, but that's my opinion. And to answer the other question, I wouldn't have a clue. I wouldn't even know where to start. We have 135 guys on our team, and I have some sort of relationship with all of them, but the discussions I had with Wes didn't really tie into the discussions that I would have had with Clint. It's 2 different. One guy's from Illinois, one guy's from Enid, and so every circumstance is different.
I know the quarterback situation is somewhat off the board a little bit, but are you comfortable talking about the 2 youngest ones, Dax and the young walk-on from Texas?
Yes, and that we like them and their future. Dax has moved around over the last 4 or 5 years, and for the first time in a number of years, he's settled into one location and is learning and progressing. It's somewhat unfair to really evaluate him now because he didn't get very many reps in the spring. But both of them are good young prospects. It's just really, really early right now because of their lack of experience in full speed reps out there with the ones.
All the position groups, once you get pads on and get going, what do you really want to go? What position group do you want to go look at because you're curious what's going to transpire?
Well, I think the defensive end spot is important, and I think that the running back spot in developing that second or third back and somebody that can help out Tyler Johnson rushing the quarterback that at this point doesn't have any experience.
What could we expect from James Castleman on the D-line after he missed the spring?
James should be fine. He understands the game. He knows our concept. From a mental standpoint, I think he'll be good. There'll be a time period of it where he'll have to make adjustments because when you don't play for a while, you lose a little bit. But he had a good off season. He's 305 pounds now, and he looks good. He's developed, and he should make progress quickly. For the amount of time that he was injured, he had worked out good and did a good job in getting himself back to the point where he can get on the field and play.
If he's as good as
Go ahead, Jim.
if he's as good as he can be, would it be a stretch to say you're as good as anybody at defensive tackle in the conference?
I'm just trying to think what everybody has coming back because you guys know I don't really pay much attention up to whoever we're playing that week. I will say that with the 4 or 6 guys that should potentially play in those 4 spots, with backup tackle or backup end, if we end up having 8, then it's the first time we've ever had that here since I've been coaching. I think that from top to bottom, we're more athletic and better than we ever have been since I've been the head coach.
When you look at the defensive side, there's a lot of returning guys that you could look at as being leaders in one way, shape, or form. Do you need just one of them maybe to step up and be that vocal guy in the first couple days?
You got to have more than one. Calvin Barnett's been good. Caleb's been good. Sean Lewis, he doesn't talk, but he's good from a leadership standpoint. Daquan Lowe's been good. We've had a number. I'm sure I've forgotten some guys. Tyler Johnson was injured, but he's been good. His work ethic's been good. So you have to have a number of them. I think more so now than we used to have years ago. In my opinion, it may seem far-fetched, but it kind of ties into all the social networking. There's so much going on that you have to have more people that can control your team than just one because it's just a lot going on out there.
Could you just talk about Calvin and his improvement from when he first stepped on campus?
Calvin's come a long way. I felt like that he was the best 2-year tackle that we brought in here, and we've had some 2-year guys that are now playing the NFL. But from day one, he's been more mature and was able to pick the game up faster than the ones that I had been around before. And his attitude's been good. His work ethic's been good.
A lot of the talk in Dallas has been that with Dez's offseason and everything, he could be one of the best receivers in the league this year. Did you expect that out of him whenever you left here?
I certainly believe it could happen. If Dez is focused and tied in and in good shape, I think he'll be in better shape because he's healthy now. This time last year he wasn't healthy. I don't know what he had, a groin or something. And I felt like it took him another month after that to get in shape. That's just my opinion from outside looking in, and I don't see a lot of it. But I know in his last 6 or 7 games, the way our schedule fell, I ended up being able to see a lot of Dallas's games. I don't know why, but it just worked out that way. And I thought he started to play really well. And once he gets comfortable, he's in shape and kind of gets in a groove is when he flourishes.
Mike, have you seen the value? You've got probably more NFL players out of your program than there's been in a long time. Do you see that value on a daily basis with recruiting, everything else?
Mm-hmm. Players young men want to get a degree, but they also want to be in an environment they're comfortable. They want to be coached and treated with respect. And and then they want to have a chance to live their dream for the most part, which is playing NFL. So they're attracted by an environment that can give them best opportunity to play in the NFL. And so you got to have guys out there to sell to get the guys to come in.
Who's changed their body so much that you almost didn't recognize them?
Let's see.
Not in the media, I mean.
Yeah. You know, I was thinking of that Abraham Lincoln commercial. You know, y'all don't remember that commercial?
Not sure.
About being honest. Let me think here. I would say, you know who has is Juwan Seals. Has put on 15, 18 pounds or something. Has really developed himself. Good. One more.
Coach, Kai Staley's coming back for one more year. What's that mean to your backfield?
Kai's been really good for us. He's one of the leaders that we talk about. You know, we tease him. He's back for his 10th year. But I said this, and Kai and I have become really close. He's like a seasoned vet, and Kai would play here as long as he could. He loves football. He loves being around the team, and it's really amazing that he's capable of doing what he does in practice and in games. And it's important for us to have that fullback at times. And he's certainly a good one. You know, he's been around, and he's a great addition to our team.
I got one more. Jimmy asked about guys that have changed kind of their body type. And Gavin tweeted out a picture yesterday of Jeremy Smith's arms. I was like, look at those biceps. Is he the most jacked running back you've ever had on the roster?
You know, he's had those for a while. A couple years. You know, it's been 2 years now that I always tease him when I see him in the off season that if I looked like him, I'd just move to L.A. and just walk around in swim trunks all day. But he's certainly benefited from, as the players call it, body by glass. Good. All right.